welcome back to another edition of Culture Critique. As I'm sure you're all aware, we are in the middle of the annual Wagner Festival in Bayreuth. And my next guest is one of this year's more unusual visitors. Schragerfabel Wax, who is with us from Canada, is perhaps the first strictly Orthodox rabbi to grace the festival with his presence. And we're happy to have him with us this evening. Welcome, Rabbi Wax.
Thank you, Christian. It's nice to be here.
Perhaps, Rabbi, you could begin by giving us your impression of what you've seen at the festival thus far.
As a Jew, you mean?
As an opera goer, a Jewish opera goer.
As an opera goer who's never been to an opera before, I just want to say that I've never seen better. But from the Jewish side, he stole it all from us, Wagner. And by us, I don't mean Heinrich Heine.
Excuse me.
Everything truly German comes from Yiddish. You show this stupidest Jew in the world one of those helmets, he'll tell you right away, Zapushke, a tin can for charity donations, a pushke mit 2 Scheufres, a pushke with 2 ram's horns to blow in the synagogue on Rosh Hashanah and the Jewish New Year. Because every Jew knows that when Rosh Hashanah comes out on a Saturday, you don't blow the ram's horn in Shiel in the synagogue, because you're not allowed to pick it up and carry it back and forth on the Sabbath. And if you were going to blow the thing, you could forget yourself and pick it up and carry it anyway. No, Zayit, it's a Jew Christian is just like love. He always finds a way. And a Jew Christian, a viele, wenn wollt gar a Viking gewesen. Even if he's a Viking, is fort a Yid, he's still a Jew, even if his name is Hoffert. We're talking here, Christian, about the olden days outside of the land of Israel, when Rosh Hashanah could sneak up on you, just like this. We're talking here, Christian, about very religious people, the Ashkenaz, the Teutonic Hasidim, and they were wearing these helmets for strictly religious reasons. They made the ram's horns a part of their clothing, a regular part of their everyday wardrobe, so that they could never make a mistake, no matter when Rosh Hashanah should happen to come out.
Well, wouldn't one horn have been enough then? Why did they have to have 2?
And the fun should get lost.
And what about the women? Why do the women need helmets if they don't do the blowing? The women's helmets don't have any horns.
I give out, go find me a shaitel, a wig in the middle of 7th century Germany. They had to keep their hair out. And don't forget, there were also Gentiles around that, don't take it personally, Christian. They just might have been looking to hit them.
But, Rabbi Wax, surely you can't be saying, surely.
My father didn't have the vaguest idea what he was saying. Take it from someone who was there, he was making it up as he went along, just to bug the Goya.
I just want Jewify, make the Lord give work for me. I just want Jewify, 'cause that's all that I see.
He had no interest in opera. He hated Wagner for all the obvious reasons. My father only went to Bayreuth to give God a kick in the teeth. I give both opera yet. It says in the Talmud, it says, Kol be'isha erva, a woman's voice, a woman's singing voice, I mean, is an indecency, a form of nakedness. Forget about opera. My father wouldn't go to the Yiddish theater, and not because his taste was so good. Halachically considered, from the point of view of Jewish law, the only difference between Leontine Price and plays like the Shiksa from Tel Aviv, halachically speaking, is absolutely nothing. Rigoletto and a lap dance are exactly the same thing, except the lap dance costs more per minute of nudity that you don't even have to be Jewish to realize is there than Giuseppe Verdi does. If my father had been a girl, it wouldn't have mattered. My mother went to the Yiddish theater whenever she felt like it, and she saw the Shiksa from Tel Aviv 6 times. But my father had been going through a bit of a bad patch. A week before their 35th wedding anniversary, my mother caught the final performance of Shiksa from Tel Aviv, came home, and died in her sleep. My father got married again about 18 months later. It was a Thursday. His leg went numb on Friday. They cut it off on Sunday and gave him a plastic aorta. His new wife came to visit him every day and didn't ask for a divorce until he'd come back home from the hospital. My father survived another bypass, another stay in the convalescent home, and a round of physiotherapy to teach him to use his prosthesis. Suddenly he was talking a lot about Nuchum Damsu, the Talmudic original of Tommy, the pinball wizard. Nuchum's arms had been amputated, his legs cut off, and he was also completely blind. To keep the ants from crawling over him, he spent his time in a roomy schissel, a basin of water, and his favorite expression was, "Gam zila toive." This too is all for the best. My father was hunting for the hidden meaning here, and Wagner was about the furthest thing from his mind.
The Jew claims that most of Wagner's mature work, from The Flying Dutchman to Parzival, and not excluding the Ring Cycle, has been stolen and perverted from pre-Christian German Jewish sources. He claims further that the German language itself is simply one stage in the degeneration of Yiddish, a process which began with Gothic and finished with English. Spielknecht! We have no need to defend our position. Wir haben es nicht als nötig.
We have no need to first substantiate the Jewification of modern art. It springs to the eye and thrusts upon us the senses of itself.
The Lehmann Company, world's largest matzo bakers, present
Strebende Lederhosen verkaufende Jünglinge.
Punks in the wholesale lederhosen trade who have taken over your brains and sensibility.
They sell your culture back to you just as soon as they've taken you out of it and made it into the image of themselves.
And then they tell you that that image is you.
They are everywhere.
The synagogues are full of them.
Und sie kommen nicht nur aus Poznan.
And they don't only come from Poznan.
462 Alabama Street, Memphis, Tennessee was not Poznan. It was a duplex divided into upper and lower apartments. The upper was occupied by Rabbi Alfred Fruchter, his wife, and teenage daughter. On January 7, 1953, it became the lower apartment, became the home of Vernon, Gladys, and Elvis, Presley.
Elvis, our Shabbos boy.
He'd light their fire on Saturdays.
He'd turn on the gas.
He did their eating on Yom Kippur. He listened to that cantorial record and played his very first recording, the one he made for Gladys in the booth, on a machine still reeking of Moisha Oisha. And when he came to form a combo with Bill Black and Scotty Moore, how many musicians were there in Memphis? You think it was an accident that they both lived on a Bell Street?
Bells, mein Städtele, Bells, mein Himmel, Furche, meine kindische Jahren vertrat. Jeden Schamschwein, sitzen unter dem grünen Bäumele, lehnen bei dem Bells, mein Städtele Bells, meine Himmel, Furcht die Schöne
Bell Street, I say. Jew Street. Bell Street.
Bell Street? Did you say Bell Street?
Yeah, Bell Street.
Don't ever mention that name. My father was the rabbi of Bell Street. What do you want with Bell Street?
I was only trying to show. I just wanted to prove that der Jüdisch spricht die Sprache.
The Jew speaks the language of the nation in whose midst he dwells, but speaks it always as an alien. The general circumstance that the Jew talks the modern European languages merely as learned, and not as mother tongues, must necessarily debar him from all capacity of there in expressing himself idiomatically, independently, and conformably to his nature.
The Jew musician makes everything sound like himself, like a cantor.
Elvis Presley?
His home life verged on the kosher. And he was further corrupted by Lieber und Stoller.
You ain't no but a hound dog, crying all the time. You ain't no but a hound dog, crying all the time. You ain't never killed a rabbit, you ain't no friend of mine.
You see what I mean, my dear. Judaic works of music often produce on us the impression as though a poem of Goethe's was being rendered in the Jewish jargon.
You mean Yiddish?
Mein Ruf soll weh, mein Herz ist tacke schwer. Mein Ruf soll weh, mein Herz ist tacke schwer. Ich will singen, mehr, weiß mir mehr.
Call it what you like, this seasoner, shrillender,
This creaking, squeaking, buzzing snuffle. Add thereto an employment of words in a sense quite foreign to our nation's tongue, and an arbitrary twisting to the structure of our phrases.
I'll give you an arbitrary twisting, you son of a bitch! It wasn't enough. My father told them that Yiddish was a prototype of all Germanic languages. No, he had to go and get mystical on them. The pure, uncorrupted sound from pristine Teutonic civilization. Russian Ashkenaz, the language of Germany, so defined by all Hebrew sources.
The Holy German Mother, before she was disgraced in Gentile mouths, mouths which not only corrupted the speech, but despised it, mouths which spat up the Jew, then presented the mother tongue as Yiddish, a dialect, a jargon, a dog German fit only for Jews. The tragedy is, they also persuaded the Jew, who began to abandon their real tongue. And now, Yiddish, the crucified Christ of language, Yiddish has been resurrected in the mouths of Jew and Gentile alike, if not in their homes, at least on their stages.
Only festivals of Yiddish can redeem the German people by leading them back to the roots of their language and culture.
Was kann will nicht kennen, aus seinen Namen es gilt, an Loschen von der Welt, was sprach, was kann Jiddisch, was sprach wohl von Jiden, was wollen sie vergessen, als alle Tiet, Jiddisch wird plötzlich weg es geht, als sprach, was kann Wenn ich mir alleine mit meinem Single, wird kein Jiddisch gelernt, es liegt mir ruhig mein Lingo, wo's darf ich schlagen
A language no one knows or wants to know, unless there's money at stake. Once the language of the Jews, Yiddish has been forgotten as a relic of degradation. Suddenly, though, it's a good thing this language no one knows. When I really want to talk, I don't speak Yiddish, and don't expect me to apologize.
A sprach von der Wiener, wo sie will ihr nicht kennen, sein armes Geld ist vertreulich vor der Welt. A sprach was
Ein unerträglich verwirrtes Geplapper.
Unintolerably jumbled blabber.
My father had all these sympathetic Wagnerites convinced that when nobody was looking, we still spoke it all the time.
Rabbi Wax claims that the real Wagnerian story is this. A young cantor named Moischmut is making his way on foot to Hochstuss am Rhein to compete in a contest being organized by Hellbeger, the town's retiring cantor. The winner will become cantor of Hochstuss and also receive Hellbeger's daughter, Sprinzelinde, in marriage.
A maiden like a series with a lumpy, gravy build. Boys smile, they don't grimace when they see how out I'm filled. I've got an inch, my father's rich, I'm lovely, young and flush. Please God, send me a young man to make me start to blush.
rolling on the banks of the Rhine, Moischmut encounters Grinder, Grinder, and Scheinler. Three sprites, water shiks as they were known at the time, who were not only not Jewish, but have never seen a Jew. Their Jewish-sounding names are a product of the times when Yiddish was the only German. The shiks tell Moischmut that anyone who is willing to renounce porn and leave his foreskin behind may take their gold and become ruler of the Rhineland. Renounce! Moischmut explains to them about kosher, then pulls down his pants and becomes master of the gold. He forces the sprites to forge it into a magic moyo messer, a circumcision knife, which will allow him to keep Germany Jewish. He has them thread bits of the gold into his talus, thus turning it into the legendary tongue talus, or talus of invisibility.
No more a cantor plain, I'm a Heldenchasen now, a hero cantor, like a tonight.
As I was saying, Wagner was about the farthest thing from my father's mind. When he wasn't getting used to being crippled, he was immersing himself in his favorite hobby, answering questions about Jewish law that no one ever bothered to ask. He had Smith, a rabbinic ordination from before the war, and even though he'd always been a businessman, he liked to keep up with all the latest developments.
A 1, 2, 3, 4, swordfish. It's kosher if you wish. Swordfish. Next Shabbos try this dish. Swordfish. Goes my fine with some Morgan David wine. Swordfish. In Jewish culture this. Swordfish. Got no cholesterol grease. Swordfish. Goes great with jolt or a hot beef knish.
Well, the authorities all agreed that the swordfish has its scales as the Lord decreed. They get bony protrusions while they are still small, but then those scales fall off when they are 4 feet tall.
Kosher, yes, it's all beef.
But the friendly they find this logic pretty shoddy. The fish ain't got no scales, just a plate-like body. And even if it did, well, just because they fall away, the fish got no more scales, and that's why they say...
Trafe for Rudy, yes, pork and beans.
Well, I ain't a rabbi, and I ain't a goy. I just want to know what I'm allowed to enjoy. If I can't have swordfish, what about cheese? What about a skirt that stops above the knees?
Swordfish, it's kosher if you wish. Swordfish, next Shabbos try this dish. Swordfish, goes mighty fine with some Mogan David. Oh,
So when you're confronted with a problem, just say no.
No? No?
No. My poor rabbinical father, with all his problems of his own, he had to go and invent some Jewish ones too.
Respond to my plea and tell me what I should do. Dein Kopf, thy head must ever be bare, says God to Jewish men and boys.
Central Rabbinical Court, and extreme reform temples were hiring off-duty policemen to remove men's toupees before they were allowed to be seen. Yeshiva boys were holding bottle drives to raise enough money to send away for the beetle wigs that had been sitting in our garage since 1964, and that my father had started to advertise in religious publications. He sent a free one to the Pope.
Meanwhile, in Hofstuss, Herr Bagel is fighting off marriage brokers and preparing his star student for the contest. The student, a tone-deaf Lichtspickel named Schmierhard, is in love with Sprinzelinde and her father's considerable fortune, and in the absence of any other competitors, seems to be a shoo-in to win.
She's such a Wunderfrau, her pa's got loads of scratch. Next week I'll grab more than a perfect love match.
Sprinzelinde can't stand him, and is torn between fleeing, killing herself, or obeying the father's wishes.
He's such a putz!
Meanwhile, a message arrives from an evil wizard called Heinrich the Trade. Formerly a member member of the synagogue's board of directors, Heinrich allowed himself to be tempted by a matzo ball succubus called Stubrune, whose evil ministrations reversed
His circumcision.
his evil powers reside in his
Foreskin.
word has somehow reached him that a young cantor has the Moyelmesser, and he thinks that it must be Schneelhorn. If it isn't turned over to him within 12 hours of the end of the next Sabbath, he will destroy Hostus and everyone in it.
The headgear scandal didn't do my father any good in the Orthodox world. He had a full head of hair himself, and the powerful hat manufacturers cartel threatened to cancel its sponsorship of the annual Olympics of Judaic jurisprudence if my father was allowed to compete. He'd been expecting to come home with the gold, and he was so depressed at what should have been his moment of supreme triumph that he decided to forget all about rabbinic prestige and, just to spite the whole lot of them, to sink every cent he had into a business he knew absolutely nothing about. It can't miss, he told me yet again. So sicher wie Yiddish Zores. It's as certain as Jewish suffering.
The Jew rules and will rule, so long as money remains the power before which all our doings and our dealings lose their force.
Yeah, that's my dad, all right. From cockroach to Caesar in one diminished chord. The last time he'd said Sicher wie Yiddish Zores, he was getting ready to go to Prague to open a theme park. Euro Disney for sensitive BAs in liberal arts. The ads for Kafkaland were a model of misleading accuracy. Learn Kafka with your guts instead of your head. You paid your admission at the gate, got a pencil and a notebook, along with a mood ring from one of the boxes next to the beaver lids, and were told to note down exactly where and when the ring changed colors. You set off on your way, followed the signs, and never quite got to where it was you thought that you were going. Never quite got anywhere at all except to the exit, where there was a huge sign reading, "The fault is entirely your own." But you did get to keep the mood ring. York University offered my father a visiting professorship, but the Czech government still insisted on closing the theme park down on the grounds that it defamed a national hero. They deported all the mood rings to Belgrade. Well, this time my father got onto a plane for Orange, Connecticut, and came back a couple of days later with the license to manufacture Pez dispensers with the heads of deceased Hasidic rabbis. The Satmar Rebbe, the Gera Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, whoever. Now, since all religious authorities are agreed that mouth-to-mouth contact with a Pez dispenser of the opposite sex is strictly forbidden, these were only for the boys. The girls got red heifers and ewe calves and other kosher female animals associated with the sacrifices in the temple.
Don't taste like
They didn't. They really didn't taste like trade. But the line between orthodoxy and out-and-out masochism is no less real for being so very, very fine. Not even the flimster, the most religious kids, and I'm talking here prodigies of sublimation by the age of 8 or 9, could really get into parve, glot kosher, brick brown, tofu-based, cholent-flavored pears.
Eben de Lederhosen verkaufen die Jünglinge.
Essen, smoken, was soll Tine, so smoked nicht.
Cigarettes kept my father from absolute destitution. They seemed to help him think straight. Quick like a bunny, except that rabbits aren't kosher. He recalled the whole lot, turned the boys' dispenser heads into glot kosher St. Christopher medals, and repackaged the temple sacrifices under the name My Little Farmyard. The candy itself was melted down, covered over with some kind of rock-hard sugar, and resurrected into new life as jawbreakers. Glot kosher candy treats called 2 tablets of the jaw, available only in the unsplittable duo pack, and with a negative commandment trading card in every one. Collect all 365 and send in the wrappers for a free list of 248 positive commands. Well, at least he didn't lose any money this time. But the cigarettes might not have been the smartest way to save it. His left leg went numb and he was back in the hospital. He'd never hop again. Like I was saying, he'd been going through a bit of a bad patch. Inside of 3 or 4 years, my father had lost 2 wives, 2 legs, the respect of his peers, a little bit of money, and the painstakingly maintained illusion that appearances to the contrary. His only son was still an observant Jew.
Moismund has ridden the rest of the way up the Rhine on a magical Litvak swan called Frye, who, instead of eggs, laid chicken and noodle kugel every Friday afternoon.
It's such a swan. Ach, girl swan with no yarmulke.
It's the day before the contest, Friday, and even though the swan is leaving a trail of free dinners on the Hofstrasse streets, Moismund cannot help but notice that the townspeople seem indifferent to free food. He inquires as to the reason why, but keeps silent about the Moirmess. Moismund makes his way to Hellbagels, where he and Sprinzelinde take one look at each other and
pissed off is my father at the best of times. Funds. But after he lost the second leg, every time I had to lift him on or off of the toilet, I thought about starting a ventriloquist act just so that I could stop his mouth. That fetching was pathological and endless. Now that his imposing, bearded presence measured approximately 29 inches from top to foot, my father was raging mad. And for the first time in maybe 40 years, it wasn't at me. He davened, he learned Torah, he broke his head over the Gemara, and this is what he got in return. Life in Poland, the pre-war wife and kids, everything else he'd been through. No, it's clueless. It's exile in a world full of goyim, and there really isn't much point to complaining. But the second leg on top of everything else was already Nishpat kein Jiden gedacht. This really shouldn't have happened to a Jew. But go ahead, get mad. My father's anger was penned up inside a 4x4 cell of halakhic observance, and he would have cut his legs off all by himself and avoided the whole problem before he'd violate the Sabbath or eat a pig. Oh yeah, sure, he wanted God to know that he was mad, but he was too set in his own ways to be able to commit a deliberate sin. But this was the mind that invented Zen theme parks and Hasidic things. As I said earlier, Kol Be'isha Erva, a woman's voice is an indecency, just as long as you've got what to be indecent with. Well, whatever was left of my father's circulatory system must have looked like a pair of 98-cent pantyhose after 200 miles of standing in for a fan belt. He would have been happy to have to fight the temptation. And such being the case, he decided there was no further reason for him to avoid the sound of a woman singing. And just to make sure that God didn't miss the point, he was going to avoid it in the wrongest possible place. And that way, he concluded, he wouldn't even have to worry that he might enjoy it.
Schmierhauer is so nervous the day of the contest that he can hardly croak out an amen. Moistfoot wins handily in true Heldenklassen style, prolonging the usual 120-minute Sabbath service to a full 6 hours. And that was a mere 9 words. As soon as the Sabbath is over, he does the magic Tarantalis.
Talis, magical fringe!
He says the magic
Words which take him instantly to Hasvik's mountain fast.
Mila, on the bliss, I'll give that bum a taste of this!
He recircumcises the sleeping Hasvik, thus ending his reign of terror. Flying back, however, Moishmut inadvertently drops the oil messer into the Rhine, where the water ships is recovering, and decide to change whatever you need to renounce.
You must first quit your Hebrew school.
Moishmut and Spritzerlinde get married. But are you must strolling by the Rhine?
I'm convinced that it's written somewhere in some Hebrew book, and I'm just too stupid to be able to find it. The phrases that kept running through my head must have come from some famous rabbi.
Whosoever the Lord God would assuredly drive mad, he either employs in a Jewish organization or sends on a lengthy vacation with a pathologically catching parent.
My father had a history when it came to vacations. He sent me to count. There were a couple of other kids back where I came from who also came from Yiddish-speaking homes. And every year they'd both get sent off to a place called Camp Nivell. It's a big Yiddish-speaking socialist summer camp just outside of Toronto. They'd come back every August and I'd ask them, "No, how was it?" And they'd tell me, "It was great, man. Pete Seeger was there." Well, it turns out that Pete Seeger really did used to go and hang around Camp Nivell. For all I know, they got Woody Guthrie and Cisco Houston and Leon Trotsky and Dr. Zhiglovsky and 3 of the Scottsboro boys. My friends got Pete Seeger, little boxes on the hillside. The boxes made it ticky-tacky. Well, the only little boxes that anybody ever even heard of at the summer camp I went to were called tefillin. There's a black one and a black one. Black one and a black one. And they're all made out of kosher animals and they all look just the same. My father was perhaps the single most prominent pussy in all of Lethbridge, Alberta. And I was at Camp Schöner Psorium. The name comes from the Psalms. Schöner Psorium Adoishim. The Lord looks out for the feeble-minded. That's great. My friends get the endless hootenanny. And I'm at Camp Withering Irony. And yes means no. Camp don't go getting any ideas here. Camp Blood and freaking Shabbos. My friends got Pete Seeger. My friends got Paul Robeson. We got the Yukero. This was the youth special. He used to drive up from New York City once a week and hack us a China, hack us a tea kettle, and rails a sportet, and turn us around a high fur hat of the type favored by Polish Chassidim. And he only ever had 2 topics of conversation: Zionism and nocturnal emission. According to him, these were exactly the same thing. Apparently it has something to do with giving in to forbidden desires. I don't know, but he was always muttering away to himself in Yiddish about things was Haltensach, that think that they're self-standing. Well, God help you if you so much as cracked a smile during any of this. I used to sit there with tears of boredom streaming down my cheeks, and all I really wanted to do was bend over, open my fly, stick my head inside there, sing Hatikva, and combust spontaneously. To this day, I still wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, drenched in a cold sweat, a sort of sticky clamminess inside my pajama bottoms, and I climb out of the bed and I pull down my blanket to see just what the hell has gone wrong with me this time. And there, staining my sheets, is a giant Israeli flag. But the only thing we had that even resembled anything you might find at a normal summer camp was arts and crafts. They used to let us whittle. Every boy got a knife and something to carve, and we used to sit there in the Moyle workshop, the circumciser training workshop. Just us, the knives, and carrot after baby carrot. I don't know, I must have been the artistic type or something. I had this irresistible urge to Juliet. Now, the camp is here. There's a road that leads from the camp directly to the center of the nearby town. The town is called Bethel, New York. It's August of 1969, and what's going on the other side of Bethel, New York in August of 1969 is Woodstock. We could see the hippies trudging along the road, hear the helicopters up above us with Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix inside. Meanwhile, I'm doing microsurgery on my daily quota of carrots and humming all along the watchtower to myself in Yiddish. It's all right, they thought I was davening. All of a sudden, a brainwave hits me and the Dylan song transforms itself.
This land is mine. Oh, thank you, dear Paul Newman.
And the next thing I know, I'm crawling along through the underbrush at the side of the road. The birds are snacking at my tzitzis. My capote is covered in grass stains. I would have felt exactly like Steve McQueen in The Great Escape, except that I was on all fours instead of a motorcycle, and my parents had never allowed me to go to a movie. But who cares about Steve McQueen in Switzerland? This was Woodstock. This was peace and love and music and girls. Girls whose mothers didn't care if they went around in short sleeves. Girls with mothers who went around in short sleeves. Oh my God, you phoned me around in Schmaltzgriebel. I'm falling into the mother load of all chicken fat. I'm wearing payas and a capote. I just know I'm gonna fit right in. And I'm starting to climb that fence now. The barbed wire doesn't scare me anymore. I'm going out into that big wide world and find out all for myself just why girls have lips when good morning stars shine. It's the Moyle Workshop Morality Squad. They got their knives out. So instead of going to Woodstock, instead of even going to Camp Niveld, bin ich gelegen in Drehen auf gebacken bagel. I was lying in the ground baking bagels. It's a fantastic Yiddish expression that's both fetch and mission statement at the same time, and goes a long way to explaining people like my father and everybody like him why it has to be bagels that you're baking. I really don't know. But liegen in there, to lie on the ground, this can mean to be dead. It can also mean that things are perhaps not going quite so well as you might have hoped. Sounds like you run into somebody you know on the street, you say, hello Moish, how's business? And Moish tells you the business is in there. This is sit shiva for the business. It's the business of blessed memory. You can even tell somebody to go. This is the Yiddish way of telling somebody to go to hell. But in this expression, In Liggen and Dresden backen bagel, to lie on the ground and bake bagels, it's clearly a description of where it is that you happen to find yourself. And it's as if being dead isn't already bad enough. You've got to spend all of eternity in hellishly hot conditions, baking bagels that, being dead, you have no need to eat. That being dead, you have nobody to whom you can sell them. That being dead, you don't even know anybody except for other dead people who are all busy baking their own lousy bagels that they can't get rid of each. This is the Jewish myth of Sisyphus. But Sisyphus is a toy. He pushes the rock rolls back. He pushes the rock rolls back. Sisyphus at least came out with muscle. Liggen and Dresden backen bagel is exactly what I was doing once we finally got to Bayreuth. I mean, I don't even like classical music. The only involvement I ever had with the stuff was being hired to do a Yiddish translation of Schubert's song Die Forelle, The Trout.
Frye, noch Fisch, ist ein frischer Zeit vor unser scharfes Tisch. Am Apfel bleibt sie fried, auf Fisch muss Tag in Haste, kein Kappel Gott will, der Morgenkeit verkläst, kein Kappel Gott will, der Morgenkeit verkläst. Sie reit und hört und wählt, du gibst sich a Stock und Schild, der Finger wird verkisst, wo's gammerisch und gewild, wie auf Schoß, der Wind noch nicht will, sie's Fettschein im Haus und macht und Goya gel, sie's Fettschein im Haus und macht und Goya gel. Nimmt der Tate und spitze Stiefelfisch. Zinkheit im Meer schnaden und geht das Feuerfisch. Am Kordes Meer das Fischel, wo's Schabes Meichel geht. Es ist das Tischel und wo ist nicht gefehlt. Es ist das Tischel und wo ist nicht gefehlt.
Liggen and Dresden backen bagel. My father was having the time of his life. His wheelchair with the Simchas Torah flags flying from either hand grip, and the fake license plate stamped with the number on his arm was becoming a tourist attraction in its own right. And he was trying to get the rest of his mood rings shipped over to sell as anti-Semitism detectors. He was interviewed, feted. The management of our hotel and the festival authorities got Lufthansa to supply us with block kosher first-class airplane food. We might have been inside the belly of the beast, but things were strictly high-delay. My father forgot all about God and his grudge, and for the first time in all his life was having fun just being himself. But the climax came when the Wagners, now in charge of the festival, invited my father. whom they seem to think of as some sort of governing leprechaun of vindication. They arranged for my father to appear on national TV.
Instinctively, we wish to have nothing in common with a man who looks like that.
He didn't have the vaguest idea what to say.
Der Jude hat keine wahre
The
Leidenschaft.
Jew has no true passion, least of all a passion which might thrust him onto art creation.
But by the next day, my father had been asked to serve as creative consultant to the new Wagner Festival. They were going to commission operas from klezmer bands based on his bullshit and present the whole lot in Yiddish.
That dialectic Jewish jargon which has been at last transplanted to our new aesthetics. Well, it's such a big world with no place for small minorities. It's all the same. It's all the same. Most Gentiles don't like me. Walking on me, and it took me by surprise. He laid his wrath out on me before the whole wide world dies. Now they say that we on the banks control the airways and the press. Maybe they're just a pack of slaves. But their notion seems the best. Don't you know that I just wanted to fight? Make a good word for me. I just wanted to fight. Circumcise all that I see.
Language is the master plan that can control your every thought.